Full of static. Good evening, church. It's good to see you. I'm glad you've been able to come out. Working on those, I guess. It's good to be here. And some years ago, when Joshua was probably 5 or 6 years old, a man told me at church, he says, I define success and richness as sitting in worshiping God together with my children and grandchildren. And it's a blessing. I know many of you know that, but it's a blessing to do that. And I appreciate that. I've never had Joshua sing songs before I speak before. So that is, I did too. Yeah, a couple weeks ago. Yeah, so it's good. It warms my heart. And it's good to see everyone here. Do I need to control this? I do. There we go. What I learned from Noah's Ark, and that song was very appropriate. Noah was looking for higher ground. And he didn't know it, and we'll see about this. This lesson is a little bit different. I've got 10 things, and we'll see if I have time to do them, but I'll try them. Some you might find humorous. Some you might already know. Some of you probably know most of them, if not all. But maybe there's one or two that you can grasp onto that would be an encouragement for you, and you can carry that with you this next week. And maybe it'll be a comfort to you or strength to you, or maybe you'll share it with someone you meet on the road, whether it's work or school or wherever it happens to be. And that's my purpose as I'm bringing these. Noah, an interesting character. We've seen movies about Noah, right? Everybody's seen movies about Noah and Noah's Ark, or maybe seen a book. We've read them to our children, to our grandchildren. We've read them. And we wonder sometimes if, how accurate is that? If you ever had anybody say, well, the ark only had one window. Well, that's true when we go back to the Word. And that's the reason it's important to stay to the Word. But there's still truths to be learned when we teach our children things like this. Noah was the son of Lamech, the father Shem, Ham, and Japheth. He was born in 2948 BC. He died in 1998 BC. He was 950 years old. He was the 10th from Adam through Seth and was born 126 years after the death of Adam. About 14 after the death of Seth. He was contemporary with Enoch for 84 years, with Terah for 128 years, and with Abram at the time for about 50 years. The Babylonians had names for him. The Chinese had names for him, and I'm not going to try to pronounce them. I don't speak either one of those languages, and they're interesting. But he's Noah. He's there. And probably the year Noah died is the day that Methuselah, or is probably the day too, but certainly the year that Methuselah died. Does everybody know who Methuselah was? We've taught our children, it's the oldest man in the Bible. He died before his dad did because Enoch walked with God. But probably he died in the flood. That's not my information. Most of that came from Young's Analytical Concordance, if you want to look that up. And I have some notes, and if anybody wants some notes, you're more than welcome to let me know afterwards, and we'll get you a copy of the notes. Noah's found 37 times in Genesis 5 through 10. At the end of Genesis chapter 5. 5 other times in the Old Testament. A total of 42 times in the Old Testament. And chronological was part of that. He's mentioned that God mentions him in Isaiah 54 twice, but it's talked about the days of Noah, that I'm going to keep my oath to you just like I did to Noah. And that oath is, we can see at the end, is the rainbow. It is there for us also. Isaiah talked about like the days of Noah. Ezekiel was combined with Noah, Daniel, and Job. They were faithful. The people around them was unfaithful. Ezekiel. So Daniel, Noah, and Job, it said it was so bad that they would have only been able to save themselves. And that's Ezekiel 14:20. And these I don't have up on the screen, but I'm going to have some others up on the screen. In the New Testament, there's 8 times, and they're interesting to look at. And it's interesting, I used to ask the young ones for years if Noah was a man or a woman. And I don't know if you ever heard of that. But there's another Noah, and she's mentioned 4 times, and it's by Joshua. And Joshua, when he's dividing up the land ownership was only to men when they came into the promised land, except one man only had 5 daughters and no sons. They approached Joshua and said, what are we going to do with our family? Are we going to make us of no account? And he made an exception for that after going to God and said, no, they each could have an inheritance in the land also. So there is another Noah, and she was a woman. So for all the women, and maybe sometime we'll bring a lesson about women, because there's some strong women in the Bible, some things that go on. So Noah, and the things I learned, I'm supposed to point this. Where am I supposed to point it? It'll go, maybe. Okay. So don't miss the boat. If you're looking for higher ground, and I tell you, for a Navy guy, you don't want to miss the boat. Missing ship's movement is a bad thing. It's those that know anything about the Navy. And Noah, not only that, if you missed the boat with Noah, what happened? You died. They were displeasing to God. And it says in Genesis 6:22, chapter 6, verse 22, and then in Genesis 7:5, it has the same one. It says that Noah did everything just as God commanded him. And in chapter 7, verse 5, Noah did all that the Lord commanded him. And that's important. That's the reason he built that ark and was given that as something to do. So what's our boat? Our boat is Christ. We can't miss Christ. If we miss Christ, we've missed it all. It's all. And so that's the thing for us to do that. And remember, we're all in the same boat. Genesis 1, verse 27, it says, so God created man in his own image. In the image of God, he created them, male and female, he created them. And when we think about, have you ever had anybody that was on your nerves? Maybe you didn't like. And I talked about in one of the lessons that, husbands and wife, there's times you don't like each other. But remember, whoever you're talking to, they were made in the image of God. And that is important for us to remember. And even though they were condemned, because it says that they were condemned because of the righteousness of Noah, that they're still important to God. In Colossians 3, would tie that over to the New Testament. He says, if you were raised with Christ, seek those things which are above, where Christ is sitting at the right hand of God. Christ did it better than anybody else. But, you don't see him belittling anybody. There's times he gave the Sadducees and the Pharisees a hard time, the leaders, the scribes, those in charge of teaching what the Bible said, the Old Testament to them, that was the Word of God in their time. And that's what we're looking at here. But we need to be careful the way we treat one another. And there was some of that this morning that Brother Pat talked about. But we need to be careful how we treat our brothers and sisters and what we do with them. And Noah, there's no evidence that he knew that they were all in the same boat. And it's hard for me to imagine building the boat the way he did and the way he's getting around. But it's an interesting thing. And when you go out to sea in the Navy, if there's any fire or flooding, you know what? You're all on the same boat. If there's any food, you're still on the same boat. It's all that way. And some of you are fishermen, and I would imagine a couple of you have boats and things like that. And it's important when you think about we're in it together. The next one I have is okay, remember, we're all in the same boat. I forgot to do that. So look at there. Will do. Plan ahead. It wasn't raining when Noah built the boat. And that's a interesting thought to me. And one of the things that I have on that is, if you want to turn to Luke chapter 10, verse 30 through 35, and what that is, that's the story of the Good Samaritan. And you'll find out as I talk different times, or maybe just a conversation between us, the Good Samaritan is my favorite parable, because the Good Samaritan didn't know the man was going to be robbed. He didn't know he was going to be beaten. He didn't know that he'd be left dead for dead on the road or the street or path, whatever they would call it at that time. But just like Noah had never seen any rain. When we look at Hebrews 11:7, and it tells that, Hebrews chapter 11, verse 7, it says, by faith, Noah being divinely warned of things not yet seen. He had never seen a thing like that. He was moved with godly fear, prepared an ark for the saving his household, by which he condemned the world, and became heir of righteousness, which is according to faith. The Good Samaritan was the same way. He was prepared for it, but he did not know it was going to happen. He did not foresee that poor man that was beaten, but yet he had the means to stop, and the money extra that in his wallet, or however they did it at that time. I'm not sure if they had a money bag or what he did like Jesus' people did, but he was prepared for that. And Noah followed God's will because he was told to do that. And that's what we need to do. Sometimes it's hard, at least for me. I'm not a visionary. It's hard for me to look at what's going to happen in 10 years, even to me in my life. That's hard for me to do. Some people are a whole lot better, but when we know what God tells us to do, we know we should heed that and look ahead to that. Stay fit. When you're really old, someone may ask you to do something really big. I mean, Noah was 500 years old, and he was told by God, hey, build an ark. It's going to be a great big boat. And them boats on the dimensions, they're the same as ours being United States Navy battleships. The dimensions are the same. The width across and the length, they're the same dimensions. So it was a task to build that ark the way it was. And it sounds like he probably had 3 helpers, maybe 7 if you count the 4 women. It doesn't sound like he got any other help. So, if we can, let's stay as fit as possible, because when we're old, someone may ask us to do something. In Genesis 6:14, where did I get it? I'll turn over there. Genesis, that's where Noah was 500 years. But in Genesis 17, verses 1 and 17, in verse 1, Genesis 17, Abraham was 99 when God said, I know you don't have a son, but you're going to have one. And he's like, wait a minute. Do you know Sarah is 90? And God says, yes, I do. She's going to have that child for you. Can you imagine Sarah's reaction? We know Sarah's reaction because we're told it in the Bible. She laughed. And I had never realized until it was in a class one time where I was at, and there was a lady that was a OBGYN, and she said, yeah, that Sarah is the oldest recorded woman ever having a baby. And, I know I've got to know a lot of you, and I don't know if anybody's 90 years old, but can you imagine having a baby at 90? Karen and I have talked about it. She can't imagine it. She's giving me this right now. It's just not happening, as she would say. I would say. She wouldn't say it that way. But who knows what God might have for us? Right now, we have quite a comfort around us. Maybe in 5 years or 10 years, that won't be the case. Maybe we'll be asked to do some things that are terribly, terribly tough, just like this. Moses was 80 when he led the people, and he had a comfortable life. He was out in the desert. There wasn't very many people, and he was herding sheep is what he was doing. And I don't know if you ever thought about Moses in that, but he was so energetic, and we know what he accomplished, but not to put him down, but they were his father-in-law's sheep. They weren't even his, and he's 80 years old. God says, come, I've got this for you to do. We may find some tough things in our life yet to come, not just all comfort, not just all of what we want to do. So when we're old, someone may ask us to do something really big, and that person may be God. It may be God lets us know one way or the other. And I believe he lets us do that in several different ways. Don't listen to the critics. You just need to get on with the job that needs to be done. And I don't think I'm the only one that has problems with that. I think it's a human characteristic. Those around us, what do they say and what do they do and what do they say about what's going on? It's a tough thing sometimes. But Peter and John, now they didn't start off this way. Peter and John in Acts 4 in verse 19, get myself to the right chapter here. They had been thrown in jail, in prison, and they were told not to teach in the name of Jesus. But in verse 19, Peter and John answered and said to them, whether it is right in the sight of God to listen to you more than to God, you judge. And we know they went right back out and what? They didn't keep their mouth quiet. They taught just the way God had told them, regardless of what the ruling people had told him to do. Should we listen to God? Did they listen to the critics? And I know we could probably apply that to Noah too. Did he listen to the critics? As we've watched the movie, they show in several different ones that I've watched, people are shaking their hands and making fun of them. And then once it's flooding, they're wanting in the ark. I don't find that in Genesis. Noah's first mentioned the end of chapter 5 in Genesis and up through about chapter 9. And I don't see any critics there. I have to believe that there was some because it would have been so out of place. What do you mean there's going to be a big flood? Rain? What's rain? Did Noah know that it was going to rain? Did he know that the depths were going to open up and bring forth all that water? I don't know, but he trusted God, whether he knew how it was going to happen or not. And if there was critics, we know he stuck to what he was doing there. Build your future on high ground. The high ground, the only high ground I can think of as a young person, if you hear about Christ, and if you're in the sound of my voice right now, you know about Christ, you've heard about at least to know him, it has to be Christ. That's our high ground. In Matthew 7:24 through 27, that's the one of the foolish man building his house on the sand, and the wise man building it on the rock. That rock is Christ. Christ told Peter that he would be the rock. He talked about Petros to rock, and to Peter, which was a pebble, a small stone to a big stone, and that is what Jesus is talking about. In Matthew 7:24 says, therefore, whoever hears these sayings of mine and does them, and that's Jesus speaking, I will liken him to a wise man who built his house on the rock. And the rain descended, the floods came, the winds blew and beat on that house, and it did not fall. It was founded on a rock. But everyone who hears these sayings of mine and does not do them will be like foolish men who build their house on a sand. The rain descended, the floods came, the winds blew and beat on that house, and it fell, and great was its fall. We're told that every knee will bow, every tongue will confess to Christ. And if we're ready for it here, we'll be ready for it there. I believe that we will fall at the feet of Jesus, just like many people did as he was traveling and talking. Just like they did when the apostles were new and they were seeing the miracles. They were falling down at their feet saying they wanted to worship them. They did not let them do that because it's Christ who is the rock. It's Christ who is the one that we should trust in. And that's our higher ground, is Jesus in this life. For safety, travel in pairs. Ecclesiastes 4, verses 9 through 12, talk about this a lot. It says, 2 are better than one because they have a good return for their labor. If either of them falls down, one can help the other up. But pity anyone who falls and has no one to help them up. Also, if 2 lie down together, they will keep warm. But how can one keep warm alone? Though one may be overpowered, 2 can defend themselves. A cord of 3 strands is not easily broken. And that's what happened when God brought in the animals. And I couldn't tell you for sure if God just had the animals walk up to Noah or if Noah went and got them. But in Genesis chapter 7, verse 2, it says, take with you 7 pairs of every kind of clean animal, male and its mate, and 1 pair of every kind of unclean animal, a male and its mate. So they were traveling by 2s, but also God was taking care of Noah and his family. For one, God knew after the flood was over, he's going to want Noah to sacrifice to him, and he only could sacrifice the clean animals. I believe the mother animals were for them to eat and also multiply faster so they could still have food. And after the flood is over, God gave them the animals to eat at that point and told them. But safety came in that. So if the safety in Ecclesiastes is so you can accomplish more. You can have help when you need it. You can have warm and safety. And that's the closest one that we're going to have in this life is our spouse. And that is, we need to grow close together. And I know that there's many couples in the church that have been married a long time. I met a man, he was having some physical difficulties in front of a store, and I stopped and talked to him. And he looked at me, and I was talking about my wife and family. And he said, well, how long have you been married? At that point, it was about 30 years. He says, I don't know anybody that's been married 30 years. I don't know anybody. And I said, well, sir, you're going to the wrong places. I said, you need to go to church. That's where they're taught to stay together. I said, I know a half a dozen couples today that have been married 60 years. And he says, what? He didn't know. Because the foundation that he had was on sand. It was on the things of this world. It was on those things that slip out of underneath you and leave you fighting for footing under you. That's our biggest partner that we have. The biggest that we can, the biggest and most meaningful that we can hold on to one another is our spouse, because we travel in pairs. And that is a God-ordained, God-sanctioned. At the beginning, God made one man and one woman, and they were husband and wife. But we can accomplish more. We can go further. We have help when we need it. We have warmth. We have comfort. We have encouragement. We have strength. That's the things that we accomplish from that. Speed is not always the advantage. In Genesis 5:32, we'll see that Noah was 500 years old when he started, or thereabout. It doesn't give the exact. It says that's when he had the children, and he was 600 years old when the flood started. Did he build the ark for 100 years? I've heard people, and they've had explanations between 90 and 120. Okay, it was a long time. Speed was not to figure in. But think about it. we're not told all the animals that was on the ark, but do you think the snails were there with the cheetahs? You think it was all about speed? If it was all about speed, I don't think I'd be alive. Because of some of the things that's happened, I've been close to. It's not all about speed. It's not all about my strength. It's not all about the good things that I have and the encouragement I've had and the decisions I made. As it was mentioned during this past week, was Ecclesiastes says that chance and circumstance happens to all men. And we have to remember that. But them chances go up and them circumstances improve if we follow Christ. If we put our faith in Him, it's not the speed that what I can do it. It's not the speed that the snail had. Do I know that a snail was on there? No, but I don't know that a cheetah was either. I assume they were. We're not told that, but we know that they came in by twos. So it's not about the speed. The ark was built by amateurs. Have you ever done something for the first time and someone come up and say, man, that is so crooked, or, that's not going to work? Well, he did good. It worked. I don't know, and till I was putting this lesson together, I hadn't thought about by amateurs. But in Genesis chapter 9, verse 20, it says, Noah, a man of the soil. And what do man of the soils do? They plant gardens and vineyards. And it says in verse 20 that he planted a vineyard. So was he proficient in building a boat? I don't think so. Did he do it anyway? He did. Do you think Moses was proficient at leading the people? Not at 80 years old. God asked him to do it, and he said, no. It's like, I can't even talk. God says, I can fix that problem. Take your brother. He's like, I don't want to. You do it anyway. But Moses came around to it. And how many times have you said, when somebody at work, our parents when we were young, I don't want to do that. I don't want to do that at work. I don't want to do that for you. I don't want to do it for me. I don't want to do it for my mom, my dad, whatever my excuse might be. But it's not what I say there. It's what I do in the outturn of it. The story of the prodigal son left. He says, I am not going to follow you. Dad, you give my inheritance today, and I'm not going to do it. And the one that stayed was upset about that, because when he came back, he took him in as a son, and that's what Christ will do for us. He will take us back. So even when we do tell God no, we need to think about it. And I believe if we're on the right footing, if we're on the right thing, us as amateurs, we will be strong for God. God will take our strength, our weakness, and make them a strength for us to use. And that's what we see throughout the Bible as we see. No matter the storm, when you're with God, there's always a rainbow. And I know that symbol has been hijacked, but it doesn't make it any less important to God. I can use whatever God has given me for bad ways, everything we have. It's just inanimate. This book here, it has no value if it just sits on the desk. It has none. I have to pick it up. I have to read it. I have to look at it. I have to meditate on it. I have to consider what it says, and then what it does to my heart. That's what makes the difference, and that's where Christ is at. So if someone is misusing something, if someone's misusing their marriage or misusing their children or misusing their job or their substance that God has given them, it really doesn't matter when it comes to us. We still have to do the right thing, and our rainbow through Christ will still be there. We will still be able to do that. If you haven't given your life to Christ, now's a good time to do that. It is, I think there might be one more. Okay, just the end. So what did I learn from Noah's Ark? if you haven't become a Christian, Noah was waiting. He was 500 years old. I don't think any of us have waited. I've never met a 500-year-old person. I don't think I'm going to, because it says after that, that 120 will be the top of that. But what do? Well, we do much like Noah did. He got out there and started building his ark, however that looked at the time. I don't know what he had, but I bet he didn't have a skill saw. I bet he didn't have any electricity or a chainsaw to cut down the trees. I bet he didn't have a La Brea tar pit where he could go get the tar to pitch. Did he squeeze all that pitch out of the trees? I don't know how he did it, but he was persistent. And that's what we have to be. We have to be persistent. And if you are a Christian and you've not been persistent enough, we can come back to Christ. We can pray for one another. It's important. It's important because you see that because of Noah, 8 were saved in the ark. And because of that, we're here. God has the ability to do that. Is it good? It can be for us. But at the judgment call, it'll be over. The time for picking will be like the rich man. We have that picture of the rich man and Lazarus. Lazarus was in the bosom of Abraham with comfort. He had had discomfort all of his life. And the rich man desperately wanted it. But there was a void fixed. And what that looked like, I don't know yet. I just have that glimpse, and that's all that is a glimpse to us in the Bible. But if you're subject to the invitation call in any way, if you want to rededicate your life, or you want the prayers of the brothers and sisters here, it is a great time to do that. We need to band together and be strong for the Lord. So if you'd like that, you can stand you can come forward, or let one of the elders know, or let any of the members know also, as we stand and sing the invitation song.